Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Niceto with the Utah Avalanche Center, and I want to welcome you to the virtual Know Before You Go presentation. First off, I want to say thank you to all our sponsors and supporters. This program would not be possible without their help. So let's get this out of the way with, right? This is not a formal on-snow avalanche course. This is an awareness program. What does that mean? Well, we're going to give you the skills to go out and find and seek out this further knowledge to help you grow in the backcountry. That means giving you the basic skills you need to be aware of, letting you know the essential avalanche rescue equipment that you must carry when you go out into the field, as well as where to get your local avalanche forecast. So right now, we're gonna roll to a 15-minute Know Before You Go avalanche awareness video, and we'll be right back.
Avalanches don't discriminate. They're equal opportunity killers, and they affect everyone in the mountains. Whether you're snowboarding, skiing, snowmobiling, sledding, cross-country skiing, hiking, snowshoeing, extreme snow angeling. If you live close to snow-covered mountains, you need to know about avalanches. It really just goes with the territory.
Everyone's really excited. A fresh storm had just come in and dropped over 2 feet of new snow. Just blasting rock and roll music, and you get to the exit point. So Mike was finishing his ski cut, and instead of waiting, he just charged right into the slope. And in his first turn, a huge rooster tail of powder came up, and everyone in the group started cheering, "Yeah, go get it!" And then in his third turn, we saw the slope just start to crumble completely. Your heart just sinks because you realize we just screwed up big time. Even though, you've got this organized rescue and you've got people getting to them within 15 minutes, you don't always get that luck that you're gonna get down there and everything's gonna work out all right. Some of the medical staff initiated CPR, but about 40 minutes after the avalanche had occurred, they had ruled his time of death. After the accident, when we were driving home, I thought, those 3 turns, that wasn't worth it.
Avalanche accidents are so tragic because they affect the entire winter community. I've personally experienced what it feels like to lose friends in an avalanche accident, the devastating ripple effect it has on everybody in the community.
What is an avalanche? There's a lot of different kinds of avalanches, but the kind that causes the most trouble are what we call dry slab avalanches. A slab avalanche is like a monster in a horror film. It lies underneath the perfect facade of this enticing powder. And it's just waiting for a trigger to come along, like you, to collapse that weak layer, and then that collapse just goes outwards in all directions. The slope just shadows like a pane of glass. There's no escape. It rockets down the hill, bounces you off trees and rocks on the way down, tumbles you over a cliff. I mean, does any of that sound dangerous to you?
I was not aware, and I did not comprehend the dangers that were out there that day. When I triggered the avalanche, it wrapped me up immediately. Not a second later, I was hit in the back with what felt like a truck. I didn't even have a chance. I ended up laying there in the snow with 2 broken femurs and my broken left arm for between 7 and 8 hours. I've had a total of 4 surgeries, still in therapy 3 days a week, trying to learn how to walk again and get use of my body again.
Avalanches are very violent events. 1 out of 4 people are killed by the trauma of hitting trees and rocks on the way down. And after they tumble you to the bottom, then the avalanche debris instantly sets up like concrete. You can't just pop up out of this. Somebody else has to get you out of the snow.
Really fun day. It was beautiful powder snow, blue skies, sunshine, just pow shots, nothing extreme. We were trying to get gnarly or anything. Came around the corner, dropped in, it was great, and then saw cracks shoot out all around me. I did see like the sky for a moment, and then just a whole wave of snow went over my face. I had like a moment of, maybe I can just punch through to the top, and as soon as I tried to move at all, I realized that I couldn't even bend a finger.
The most important avalanche skill to learn is how to read avalanche terrain, which mainly means judging slope steepness. Almost all avalanches occur on slopes steeper than 30 degrees, but you know what? When the snow is sketchy, we can still have lots of fun playing on mellower terrain. We just want to make sure we're not on, underneath, or even connected to steeper slopes. The bottom line is the only time we should even consider getting into steep terrain is when we have safe avalanche conditions.
Some slopes are going to produce much worse outcomes should they avalanche than other slopes. For example, if you're above a bunch of trees, rocks, cliffs, or you're going to get washed into a lake or a gully, the outcome of getting caught in an avalanche like that is much worse than if you're in some big wide open meadow.
The difference between riding in a ski resort and riding in the backcountry is really night and day. In a ski resort, we use explosives and terrain closure to minimize the risk of avalanches to our customers. But outside the ski area, once you step just 2 feet over that rope line, you're in a totally different environment.
Anybody that's going into the backcountry or thinking about going off-piste at a resort really needs to understand that it's a totally uncontrolled environment. There isn't any ski patrol, they're not bombing or doing any avalanche control. It can be really dangerous. So essentially you need to be, your own avalanche expert.
So in 9 out of 10 avalanche fatalities, they're triggered by the victim or somebody in the victim's party, which is actually good because it's not like getting struck by lightning. We have a choice. That means if we learn something about avalanches, we can avoid getting caught in avalanches.
Avalanche safety can seem totally overwhelming, but there is a systematic, step-by-step process that can keep you alive in avalanche terrain. Just knowing 5 basic things can prevent most avalanche accidents. Get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way.
Everyone who goes into backcountry avalanche terrain needs basic avalanche rescue gear.
You need an avalanche transceiver, a shovel, and a probe. And you need to practice a lot to know how to use all of this gear, because your friend only has about 15 minutes to live buried beneath the snow.
A lot of people also use an inflatable avalanche airbag backpack that will help them rise to the top of avalanche debris. How well does this avalanche rescue gear actually work? Well, for 1 out of 4 people killed in an avalanche, they're gonna die from trauma. They're gonna hit trees or rocks on the way down the slope. So avalanche rescue gear isn't gonna do anything for them. The rest of them die from asphyxia, from breathing their own carbon dioxide underneath the snow. But it doesn't have to be that way.
If everyone wore an avalanche airbag backpack, as well as an avalanche transceiver, 2 out of 3 people who die from asphyxia would still be alive.
The bottom line is avalanche rescue gear will only save about half of us. But in order to stack the odds in my favor, I make sure to never go skiing without them.
As sledders, we travel in the backcountry a little bit differently than skiers, but I still need to have my avalanche gear attached to my body. Having it attached to my tunnel does me no good. If I get separated from my sled, I get separated from my safety gear. If your buddies that you ride with don't have the training and the equipment, don't let them ride with you.
So now that you've got the gear, you've got to get the training. So when you take an avalanche course, you're basically getting keys to a whole new world. You'll learn about avalanche terrain, snowpack, weather, rescue. Essentially, you're trying to take the guesswork out of travel in avalanche terrain.
As a first timer just coming in, it's really important to take the right classes and gain all the knowledge before going out in the backcountry.
Getting the training isn't just taking an avalanche class. It's a great start, but really it's about practicing what you've learned. Make it a ritual. Make it fun. Throw down some lunch money and do some time drills. When it comes down to it, it's about having your friends back and knowing that they have yours.
It's not just the skiers that need to get the training because sleds are taking us further into the backcountry, so we really need to bring our avalanche skills up to the level of our rider skills.
Next, you gotta get the forecast. These avalanche forecasters are pros. They're gonna tell you everything you need to know. They're gonna tell you about the snowpack. They're gonna tell you about the weak layers. They're gonna tell you where avalanches are gonna happen, where you can likely avoid avalanches. All that information is one click away.
To get the avalanche forecast, visit avalanche.ca in Canada or avalanche.org in the States.
Before I even get on the snow, I check my local avalanche advisory.
So take the time, get the forecast.
When you're traveling in the backcountry, you gotta get the picture. What's that mean? It means pay attention. Look for recent avalanches. Listen for cracking or wumping that's taking place around you. Look for recent storm snow, wind-loaded snow. Look for rapid thawing. If you look for all of these things, you're gonna get the picture. You're gonna be a safer backcountry skier.
You get out of harm's way in the backcountry by first avoiding suspect slopes and terrain to begin with. We don't want to regroup in avalanche paths, and we don't want to stop or regroup in runout zones.
Some of my best advice I can give you is when we're out hill climbing and there's a bunch of us, don't go park right at the bottom in the avalanche path. Park on the outside, stay out of harm's way.
Just like you ski a slope, one person at a time, once you're at the bottom, get out of the way of the avalanche path.
We want you to realize that avalanches are dangerous, but you can avoid getting caught in them. First, get the gear, but then you've got to get the training before ever going into the backcountry. Next, always check your local avalanche forecast so you can anticipate the given avalanche conditions for the day. You can get the picture by looking for the obvious signs of instability, and you'll be getting out of harm's way by managing your exposure to potentially hazardous slopes.
A lot of times when people watch us in the films, all they see is the action of us shredding these big lines. But what you don't see is the behind the scene, all the prep that goes into making sure that the slopes are safe, checking out the snowpack, waiting for snow to settle, doing all the homework it takes to safely rip the big lines.
All this information is great and incredibly practical. But at the end of the day, if you feel uneasy about something, it's about having the courage to say no and walk away. The mountain isn't going anywhere.
It doesn't matter if you've made thousands of good calls. All it takes is one bad call, and that's one too many. Some days the mountains are screaming, get out of here, and some days the mountains are going, come on in, it's time to party.
needs to know about avalanches? Well, I need to know about avalanches. I grew up on the East Coast, some small ski areas where avalanches weren't really anywhere to be found. I moved out to Utah, went to school right there in Salt Lake Valley, found myself in big snow-covered mountains that I wanted to get out and get after. And I had to learn how to deal with these avalanches. So just like I grew up during my summers back home, hanging out on the beach, playing in the ocean, I had to learn about currents, riptides, shore breaks, all that stuff. Water in the ocean is really powerful. Snow is no different. I got to learn about these avalanches when I'm out having fun in the mountains. On average in the United States, there's 30 avalanche fatalities that occur each year. It's not just in the big mountains, right? We can have these things anywhere. There's snow covered on a slope and the conditions are right. These avalanches don't discriminate. What does that mean? Well, they aren't just killing extreme athletes riding Alaskan spines or getting out in the big alpine mountains. They can get you anywhere, and they're going to get snowmobilers, skiers, snowboarders, snowshoers. If you're making a snow angel on a steep slope, an avalanche could get you too. The cool thing about these avalanches is they don't just come sliding off the mountain out of nowhere getting you. We create these issues. 90% of avalanche fatalities and accidents are caused by the victim or somebody in their party. Where do we start? Well, we got to know what an avalanche is. We can keep it pretty simple. It's snow sliding down a mountain. We got to get a little bit more into the weeds, and what do I mean by that? Well, there's a couple different types of avalanches we can think about. First off, we have these loose snow avalanches, right? That can be a slough or something like that. Maybe you're skiing a steep slope and you see the snow sliding down next to your skis or board. We call that a loose snow avalanche. Then we have what we look out for as these slab avalanches. These are the ones that are going to kill us. They shatter like a pane of glass, and before you know it, we're on a ride for our life going 75 miles an hour down that slope. And who knows what consequences could affect us. They can also be wet and dry, so weather presents other problems for us. In this slide, you can see a great example of a slab avalanche. The snowboarder gets mid-slope, this thing shatters like a pane of glass, and before you know it, he's barreling down the slope on it. He doesn't know up from down, you can't see much. It's a very violent event, and you're pretty lucky if you come out unscathed at the end. So we know what an avalanche is. We got to think about where do these things occur, right? We already talked about it. They happen in big mountains, big alpine scenes, where these avalanche paths are obvious. But you can see in the slide there, avalanche terrain can also be quite ambiguous. Right there behind that truck in that photo, that's a slope that's about 100 yards from a parking lot. This was an avalanche fatality that occurred in Utah at Tibble Fork Reservoir, where a parking lot on a Sunday afternoon was filled with about 100 cars. A young lady was snowshoeing on a path, triggering an avalanche that came down from above, and it buried her in a creek. Unfortunately, she was found dead. It just goes to show that we don't have to be getting crazy to be getting caught in these avalanches, and we got to be prepared every time we go into the mountains. Most accidents occur outside resort boundaries. What does that mean? Well, on many given days, we can go to a resort and have a great time and not worry about avalanches. Why? Well, we have ski patrol and snow safety working to mitigate that hazard and reduce it. But as soon as we step outside those resort boundaries, all bets are off. Nearly 12% of avalanche fatalities occur after leaving that resort boundary. So our first job is identifying this avalanche terrain. What does it look like? Again, it can be all different types of terrain. In your face, scary ski terrain. Or it can be a really small slope with a consequence that could present an avalanche hazard. How do we look at this stuff? The first thing we're going to do is use slope steepness, or our slope angle, to our advantage. Most avalanche accidents occur between 30 and 45 degrees. Avalanches love to occur at 38 degrees. On average, that's their favorite place to slide. Anywhere under 30 degrees, we can go and have a blast and not stress too much about avalanches, as long as we don't have big, steep avalanche terrain connected to the piece that we happen to be on. Anything over 45 degrees, the slope likes to shed that snow off and clean itself. So what does that mean? We're not really going to find too many slab avalanches and big problems like that on those steeper slopes, 45 to 50 degrees. So check out this slope. what do we got here? So we have obvious avalanche terrain and an obvious avalanche path in the middle of the slope there. But what I'm interested in is what's connected to it. So let's imagine this like dominoes. On that slope, from the bottom to the top, we have dominoes all laid out, from those trees all the way up to the summit there. On top of those dominoes is a slab of snow. What happens when I'm at the bottom of that hill and I dump that domino over and all that energy continues to go upslope through the rest of the line of dominoes? That slab on top of it is going to be weak and it's going to collapse. We just triggered a slab avalanche. So this is why we have to worry about the terrain we're not only on, but the terrain we are connected to. Here's some examples of connected avalanche terrain. In that lower left photo, you can see the piece of slab break off, but it really doesn't travel too far. Maybe that slope's around 15 to 20 degrees. But looking down the ridge, you can see the slope angle drastically increases where the rest of the avalanche ran. We have convexities, such as the one in the bottom right, where the slope just rolls over and it's stretched like a rubber band. It's much easier to cut that rubber band when it's stretched and there's a lot of tension on it than when it's relaxed. So that convexity is exactly what that does. Not only do we have to be worried about the avalanche happening, we have to be worried about the consequences that the slope we choose to ski or ride on can present. What does that mean? Well, are we seeing a terrain trap, a big gully or bench where snow can stack up really, really deep? The average burial depth is about a meter, so 3 feet. Anything deeper than that is going to be really difficult to get your partner out of the snow. We have trees. Some folks think trees anchor your snowpack to the slope. But if the trees are wide enough to ski, ride, or snowmobile through, they're wide enough to slide in avalanche terrain. So that makes these trees that I felt safe in turn to baseball bats when I trigger an avalanche and I'm racing down the hill on this thing. Cliffs and rocks, pretty obviously, we don't want to take a spill over those. Trauma is a big, big problem with avalanches. So how do avalanches form? Well, it all starts in the beginning of the ski season. When we're getting ready, maybe we're dusting our skis off and feel the temperatures change and the weather starts moving around a little bit. Maybe we get a light dusting of snow, maybe a little rain, some warmer temperatures, some cooler temperatures. Things are all over the place. But before you know it, we're kind of building this sandwich, right? And the way I like to think of my snowpack is indeed like a sandwich. So let's say you're building your lunch for Monday. You put your piece of bread out on the counter. That's it for Sunday night. You come back Monday morning to go to stack the rest of your sandwich on top. What happened to that piece of bread? Well, it went stale overnight. Just like that piece of bread went stale, so can snow. So when snow's hanging around from the early season, sitting on the ground, it can become stale. It facets, which we call it. That's weak snow. That can present a problem for us when that sandwich develops on top of it. What happens when you go to take a bite in it? It all crumbles beneath. Here's my colleague, Trent Meisenheimer, speaking about weak layers.
When I'm walking around in the mountains, I like to think of weak layers like a great white shark lurking just beneath the snow surface. You always need to be thinking, what's underneath me? Take this cross-section of the snowpack. You may be walking in a flat meadow and get the weak layer to collapse, and it might make a really loud noise. But the snow didn't move anywhere. That's a huge red flag. In fact, you just triggered an avalanche. That same snowpack, if you were to tilt it up to say 35 degrees, will slide with deadly effect.
So these things can get really complex when we're out there looking at the snow and stuff. Or we can dial it back and keep it really simple. What are we looking for, right? We're looking for structure. We're looking for strong snow over weak snow, right? So just like in this video, again, you can see Trent pushing his fist into that really strong, cohesive slab of snow. And then as he works lower in the snowpack, you can see all that weak, sugary snow just falling out of his snow pit. That's strong snow over weak snow. That weak snow on the bottom, those are those dominoes that we talked about earlier. And as soon as we flip them down and collapse that weak layer, we're off to the races. So what does all this mean? Well, we can't just be concerned with the snow that we're riding on top of. You know, powder snow, it all looks good all the time. It's easy to always say, yeah, but we got to know what's going on beneath our skis and board. So that's why we got to dig a little bit deeper. So moving along, we got to do a little math. We have 4 ingredients for an avalanche. Here are the 4 ingredients for a slab avalanche. These are the 4 things we must have to create an avalanche. You got to have your trigger. You got to have a slope for it to occur on. You have to have a weak layer. And on top of that weak layer, you have to have that strong, cohesive slab. So we've been talking about avalanches, what we're looking for in this terrain, how to identify it. Now we got to talk about the equipment we got to have before we get out and get after it. What does that mean? It means we got to get the avalanche rescue equipment, we got to get the gear, and then we got to know how to use it most off. So at the end of the day, why do we have to learn about these avalanches? Well, they can kill us. In the United States, 73% of avalanche fatalities are due to asphyxia. So what does that mean? That means we trigger one of these avalanches, we're sliding down the hill on it, all this stuff is barreling around, the snow's going crazy. We get buried beneath it. It sets up like concrete. You can't even punch your fist through to the top, right? After a little while, about 5 or 6 minutes, we pass out from rebreathing our own CO2. After about 10 minutes, that's when our chances start to go down. 15 minutes, our odds of survival go down by nearly 50%. So what does that mean? It means I need to have my avalanche rescue equipment, I need to know how to use it, and I need to get my buddies out of the snow in under 15 minutes. 25% of us, we're going to be killed by trauma. So not just getting buried beneath these avalanches, but what are we going to hit going down the slope? Again, think of those consequences. Trees, rocks, cliffs, lakes, tons of different terrain features that can get us caught up and in trouble. So trauma is going to kill about 25% of us. So back to that 15-minute number, right? We got to get our buddies out in 15 minutes or less. Take a look at this graph. That shows just how much our odds decrease of survival after that 15-minute mark. After about 30 minutes, we're down to about a 10% chance of survival. So we can't stress enough. We got to have this rescue equipment and we got to know how to use it. You might be asking, well, what is this stuff? First off, we have our avalanche transceiver. This is how we're going to find our partner in the snow buried beneath it, right? Then we have our avalanche probe. This helps us pinpoint our buddy who is down below the snow. And then we have the most tasking piece of avalanche rescue, and that is shoveling your buddy out. This snow sets up like concrete and is really difficult to move. Next time you got a snowstorm around you, go to your local grocer and dig in that snow pile that's plowed up around the light pole. You're going to see just how difficult it is to dig in avalanche debris. Your essential rescue equipment may not be the only thing you should be bringing with you. You should have that pack full of all types of goodies. Maybe that pack's an airbag. Airbags are great. They help increase your surface area and help you become a bigger piece of avalanche debris, hopefully rising to the top of it in the event of an avalanche. Other things such as first aid kit, communication devices, small shelters, a repair kit. You never know what tools you might need when you're out there, so it's always a good idea to have the things you need to fix your gear. And of course, if you get stranded out overnight, you're going to have to start a fire. So always have a source of fire. Here's Trent again. He's wearing an airbag and he's showing it being deployed. You can see that the float pack inflates, making him a bigger piece of the pie. Let's think about avalanche debris going down a hill like a bag of chips. Open your favorite bag of chips, shake it around, and notice what chips come to the top of the bag. It's going to be the bigger ones, right? All the smaller crumbs and pieces, they fall down to the bottom. So these violent avalanche events, they happen just like that. That airbag helps us be the biggest chip in the bag. If everybody wore this equipment and utilized airbags, about half the lives that have been lost to avalanches could have been prevented. What happens if we don't have this equipment? Well, our odds of survival and being involved in one of these avalanches can be very slim. In this event right here, 2 gentlemen were snowshoeing. Avalanche danger presented itself on the slope that you can see there, and nearly that entire slope slid and buried these gentlemen quite deep in the snow with no avalanche rescue equipment. So no transceivers, no shovels, no probes. They were just out for a snowshoe on the walking path and found themselves in this trouble. So that goes back to, again, that avalanches don't discriminate. It doesn't matter who we are. If we're in the right place at the wrong time, we can be in trouble. Another useful tool in these avalanche accidents is RECO, the RECO reflector. This is used by search and rescue and ski patrol to identify avalanche victims buried beneath the snow. Notice how I said ski patrol and search and rescue though. The scanners that are used to identify individuals with the RECO reflector are big and bulky, and we don't carry these things around with us in the backcountry. Here's the thing though, a lot of these organized rescues from ski patrol or search and rescue, they're not always going to be able to get to us. We're going to jump back to that 15-minute number, remember? 15 minutes or less to get your partner out of the snow. So it's going to be pretty tough for ski patrol to organize, get to in 15 minutes. Same with search and rescue. What if the weather's bad? There's low visibility. Helicopters don't always like to fly. So we got to be thinking about these things when we go into the backcountry. That's why we rely on our training and the equipment we carry. So this gear works if we practice and we learn how to use it. This isn't something you do one time a winter or you dust off just before the season. This is an ongoing process. These skills are perishable and we constantly need to be working on them. Maybe you don't know where to start. Well, you're already on your way by attending this Know Before You Go presentation. What's the next step? Well, we got to get some experience and we got to take an avalanche course. Tons of awesome organizations that are going to be able to get you dialed out there. So you're going to want to visit avalanche.org to find your local avalanche center and education, or avalanche.ca up in Canada. What are you going to learn in an avalanche course? Well, we've kind of been brushing upon some details, but you're just going to go more in depth on all this stuff. You're going to learn about different types of avalanches, how to choose terrain based on the snowpack and weather, how to travel in this given terrain, making smart decisions as a group, working on rescue, and how to rescue more than one buried victim. And at the end of the day, how these actions can impact others around us in the backcountry. So all that stuff, we got to get the gear, we got to get the training before we get out. Now it's time to get after it. What's our first step? We got to get our avalanche forecast. So again, you can find these all at these one-stop shops for avalanche things. Avalanche.org in the States, avalanche.ca in Canada. What are you going to find when you're looking at your avalanche forecast here? Well, first thing that's going to stand out is the avalanche danger scale. It's a 5-step scale that is not linear. So what does that mean? It means the jump in danger from low to moderate is much different than the jump from high to extreme. What do they mean in simple terms? Well, you see it there. Mostly safe, low, but low danger doesn't mean no danger, right? And at the top you can see extremely dangerous. What do I want to focus on though? I want to focus on right in the middle, that moderate and considerable area. This is where most avalanche accidents and fatalities occur. Why is this, we might be asking ourselves? Well, we find these days of avalanche danger typically after a storm rolls through, the powder stacks up, everybody's out and getting after it, we got blue skies. There's still avalanche danger out there, but everyone's really excited. So on those considerable days, that's where about 50% of these avalanche accidents occur. So these can be tricky conditions that require certain skills to navigate safely. So we can't just look at that danger scale, right? We got to know, why do we have a considerable danger, or why is it a low danger? We got to look a little deeper. That avalanche forecast, again, doesn't just give us a danger rating. It gives us details about what the avalanche problem is for the given day, where that problem can be found, how the weather may affect it, and at the end of the day, ultimately, where the good skiing and riding is. By staying out of avalanches, that's where you're going to find your best skiing and riding. So when it's time to get the picture and we're getting out there, we're getting after it, we got our forecast, we know what we're looking for, we got to pay attention to obvious clues. Do other tracks on the slope mean it's safe? No. Check out that photo right there. You can see some skiers and boarders laid down some fine looking tracks on looker's right of the photo there. And then, bumped up the ridge a little bit to the left, another set of tracks gets laid down. A little bit of a change in aspect, a little bit of a different choice in slope can mean the difference between getting caught in an avalanche and having some sweet powder turns. So what are these things we're looking for out there? Well, we got 5 obvious signs, we call them red flags, for avalanche danger. The first one, it's recent avalanches. When I'm out there walking around on my skis or board or riding around on my sled, I got my avalanche eyeballs on and I'm looking for all these signs of avalanches. Maybe some cornices breaking off, some small sloughing. Maybe I see a big slab avalanche. That is awesome data for me to put in my brain to help me guide myself through the rest of my day. Why do I say that? Again, because recent avalanches are the best sign of avalanche danger. Cracking and collapsing. You might have heard it called whoomphing, right? That's when the snowpack releases all its energy, right? Those dominoes get flipped down. As soon as we do that, we collapse that weak layer. Things may shatter like a pane of glass. We may see some shooting cracks in front of us, but there was no avalanche. Why is that? Well, think about those 4 avalanche ingredients, right? If we're walking around on a flat meadow or a ridge, we see those cracks, what are we missing? We're missing that slope of 30 degrees or more slope angle, right? So we got to be looking for that cracking and collapsing, that whoomphing sound. Wind drifted snow. We don't like that stuff. It can move snow 10 times faster than it can fall out of the sky. Why do I look at that so much? Well, if we get a nice storm, some light powder snow, and then we get some wind, maybe let's say 15 to 30 miles an hour, that snow's getting blown around. What am I going to look for? That's going to create avalanche danger. A wind slab may develop. Snow, that's why we do it. It can also cause a problem. Rapid snow or rain, we don't like to use that 4-letter R word, can increase avalanche danger. So if we're out in the backcountry and we're getting a ton of snow, it's really coming down, or maybe we wake up to a bunch of fresh overnight, nice foot, we got to think, recent heavy snowfall, that puts on our avalanche red flag. We got to be looking for the avalanche danger. Rising temperatures. We might find this problem in the spring or if we have a warm spell, right? The sun, the warm temperatures, the snow takes on moisture. This can create avalanche problems. Maybe you see the pinwheels or the roller balls coming down the slopes in the springtime. That's a really good sign that it's time to get out of the mountains. During those seasons, we like to say start early, end early. Get into the mountains while they're frozen and get out before they become unglued. So at the end of the day, how do we get out of harm's way? We have all these clues and all this information, but how are we going to avoid this avalanche danger? Well, we got to use safe travel protocol, right? What do we mean by that? Well, we got to work one at a time around avalanche terrain. That means skiing the slope one at a time. With communication with your partner, both verbal and visual. Have a plan, right? Don't ski on top of each other and stick to that plan. Let's take a look at these photos. What's wrong with them? Let's look at that one on the left there. Typically when we're putting in our skin tracks, that's what we call that up track that person is putting in there in the middle of that slope. We want to use safe travel routes to do so. We want to have the least amount of exposure to avalanche danger as possible. If it were me, I'd want to go up the side there, along that nice mellow ridge, get to the top, and then evaluate my conditions, instead of finding myself in the barrel of the gun in the middle of that avalanche starting zone. On the right there, you can see 3 individuals sitting at the bottom of that slope. And then just above them, you can see one of their partners skiing down. What were to happen if that skier triggered an avalanche and his buddies were below them? That wouldn't be a good situation. And with everybody getting out and getting after it, we got to think about other groups out there. So are we putting others at risk? Are we skiing on top of other parties? Are we communicating with other individuals in the backcountry? We got to make sure we're taking care of our own out there and we got each other's backs. So remember, we have a systematic step-by-step approach to help ourselves reduce our risk to avalanche. First off, you got to get the gear. You got to have your avalanche rescue transceiver, your probe, and your shovel. Then you got to get the training. Remember, this is the first step. It doesn't stop here. You got to take an on-snow avalanche course. Once you got that stuff before you go out, it's time to do things every day when you're getting out in the backcountry. That starts with getting your forecast every morning. Once you have the details for the given day, you know what you're looking for in terms of avalanche danger and hazard, you got to get out and get the picture, right? You got to be looking for those obvious signs of avalanche danger, those red flags. And then finally, we got to get out of harm's way. So using safe travel protocol, communicating with our partners, and doing it the right way. Give yourself some space. Take it easy, spread out, and look out for each other. Once again, want to thank all of our sponsors and supporters who help make this program possible. We would not be able to do it without you. To find out more, visit knowbeforeyougo.org. There's tons of awesome resources as well as e-learning modules available that will be a great follow-up from this presentation. Again, I'm Andrew Nicetta with the Utah Avalanche Center, and I want to thank you so much for joining us.